waiting for you. One by one we will take you.
What are we going to do today?
We're doing top fives. That's what we do. We do top fives. And since there's two of us, we're going to be doing 10 altogether, but they're the same episodes, so it may be 5. We're doing Cabinet of Curiosities. There are 8 episodes. We're going to pick our top 5 out of those 8. Cabinet of Curiosities is Guillermo Del Toro's baby. It's his. Did you get the distinct Alfred Hitchcock, Rod Serling kind of vibe from it?
Yeah, it's like his version of Twilight Zone or Alfred Hitchcock Presents, for sure. And
Yeah.
he even comes out, portly man that he is himself, and introduces each episode like Alfred Hitchcock did. Yeah.
Yeah, I was getting that or a Night Gallery vibe, for Rod Serling, because it's almost all horror, not sci-fi or any of that, even though there are some science fiction elements in them.
And instead of a portrait, he's always opening a cabinet or a drawer of a little sculpture-like thing he's got there.
And pulling out some significant prop or prop-esque sort of thing from the episode. But then he also always has a little figurine of the director. Because obviously he is, and he verbally calls out the director for every episode. So that's his emphasis.
I think that's a very cool thing to do. Not many people do that. We do that on this show a lot with a lot of the stuff we do.
His inaugural season of 8 episodes, all 8 directors were great and did a good job. I mean, I don't think there's a clunker in the bunch of this, which is unique for a limited series like this. Don't you think?
I totally agree. There's a couple that are less scary and maybe a little more humorous or dark humorish than they are traditional scary tales, but I don't mind that. I like the variety. It's very much like any good horror anthology to have a little humor in there.
Agreed. Yeah.
My number 5 is The Outside. It was directed by Anna Lily Amirpour. We know of her from a movie I've mentioned several times on our regular podcast called A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Very moody, atmospheric movie. This episode that she directed, The Outside, is not that way at all. Totally surprised me. It is probably the funniest of the episodes that we're talking about. Stacy, who is sort of an awkward person at where she works, is wanting to fit in. She uses this popular lotion that causes an alarming reaction, and an unnerving transformation takes shape. It stars Kate McCucci, who I believe is a comic actress. I know I've seen her in some television shows. And
her partner do a lot of comedic songs as well. They've done a lot for Big Bang Theory. And she's actually been a guest star on Big Bang Theory.
Okay. I did not know that. And then it also stars Dan Stevens from Downton Abbey. And he's in a cameo role, a television show that is just awesome. I just thought he was fantastic in it.
Yes. And I liked the fact that it felt very EC comic to me, because it was that, be careful what you wish for, sort of monkey's paw kind of, classic short story. As they had a really cleverly designed contact lens she wore that made her look cross-eyed, that it moved her pupil over.
Yeah, I've always thought she was odd looking, but I didn't think she was unattractive. And in this episode, they are making her look unattractive.
Oh, yeah.
And then
giving her stuff like
good.
She's a taxidermist. I mean, that she's a bank teller whose hobby is taxidermy. My number 5, interestingly enough, barely made it to 5. It was 6, but it kind of bumped up when I did the whole hierarchy sort of thing, is Pickman's Model, which is an H.P. Lovecraft short story, one of my favorite H.P. Lovecraft short stories. It is directed by Keith Thomas, who did the really bad Firestarter remake and another movie I haven't seen called The Vigil, but it had great performance in it. I don't think it was the best adaptation I've ever seen of Pickman's Model. As a matter of fact, I saw a better version on Night Gallery. Rod Serling actually did a version of this.
Okay, very cool.
that was really scary and better than this. I did love, though, the production design of this, the setting in Arkham, a very Lovecraft feel to it all the way through, even down to the nightmares he was having when he saw the paintings and all that. The story basically is a young up-and-coming artist at an art academy ends up befriending or pseudo-befriending a new guy whose paintings are all extremely visceral and haunting and dark. He kind of avoids him for a while. Years later, he resurfaces in his life, and the paintings tend to destroy this guy's sanity and his life. I thought it was a good adaptation. Again, I think the Night Gallery one is better, but this was okay.
Killer, Mommy. Killer.
My number 4 is Graveyard Rats. In this one, we have a grave robber who eyes the riches of a wealthy new arrival to the cemetery, but he must survive a maze of tunnels and an army of rodents to secure them. It was directed by Vincenzo Natali. He directed Cube, which I've never seen. But he also did In the Tall Grass and Splice, which I have seen, and I like both of those movies.
In the Tall Grass, isn't that a Stephen King?
It is. It's him and Joe Hill, his son. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. All right. That's
Together.
what I thought.
Yeah. The reason I liked this story, and you may agree or disagree with me, but there are 2 Lovecraft stories in this group of 8 that Del Toro chose. And to me, this one played more like a Lovecraft story than any of the 2 that were actually Lovecraft.
Agreed. I thought the same thing.
Yeah, it was written by Henry Kuttner, who was part of the original Lovecraft circle. So he was friends with Lovecraft. And I just think this was the best Lovecraftian story of the bunch. So
had the best ending, I thought. The best horrific ending of the bunch. Really liked it. David Hewlett, who plays the lead in it, is really good and strong. The production design works for me. It has some genuine jump scares that are great. Yeah, I agree with you.
And it's got the giant mutant rodent that's blind from being underground. It just looks like something right out of a Lovecraft story. So. Yeah,
there's in researching this, found out that Lovecraft is Guillermo Del Toro's favorite author, and that's why there's a lot of Lovecraft feeling even in episodes that aren't a Lovecraft story.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
My number 4 was Graveyard Rats. So,
so we're both talking about the same thing.
So we're both talking about the same thing.
Wow, well, we killed 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yep.
My number 3, The Autopsy. Brief synopsis is a seasoned sheriff investigates a dead body in the woods and calls on an old pal, a medical examiner, to help piece together a series of chilling events. This story was directed by David Pryor, who directed The Empty Man, which I have never seen. Gruesome, probably the most gruesome story of the bunch, wouldn't you say?
Gruesome and also sci-fi, which was good. I loved it.
Yeah. You've got the alien that's inhabited the guy, but you've also got the guy that's kind of doing an autopsy on himself to prevent the alien from fully taking over his body. He blinds himself with his scalpel. But we do find early on in the story that he had a cancer diagnosis, I believe, and was going to die anyway.
Yeah, only had 6 months. So yeah. Oh, it was just well filmed, well shot, great suspense to it, great dread in parts of it. The mystery elements worked for me really well of figuring out what's going on and why did he want that cube and all of this. So
beat them or burn them. They go up pretty easy.
My number 3 was your number 5. Mine was at The Outside. I liked it better than Graveyard Rats. So I elevated it to my number 3. Do you want me to do number 2 and switch up a bit?
We could do that.
My number 2 is ironically elevated because it's one of the few that isn't, to me, Lovecraftian until you kind of get to the end. There's Lovecraft feel to it, but not really until the end, which is Lot 36. Directed by Guillermo Navarro, who is a director of photography for people like Guillermo Del Toro, Robert Rodriguez. So he's got a great camera eye and great lensing work. And it's based on a story by Guillermo Del Toro. Mm-hmm. So basically the story you follow a really just a degenerate sort of freeloading con man sort of guy who's used to doing the storage wars thing where he buys stuff from abandoned storage where people have died, and he goes and hawks them or pawns them, sells them, tries to get rid of them to people, everything else. He's an unsavory character all the way through, but he ends up in possession of some unique arcane occult items that end up basically by the end of it summoning a demon that does what demons do when you summon them and don't pay them back. I really just liked the whole feel of this episode. It may be because it was the first one, and I really thought, oh, what a refreshing, little slice of horror on television. I love this kind of thing.
That was an interesting first episode, I thought, too.
Why are you torturing me like this?
My number 2 is, surprisingly, because I didn't think it would be, The Viewing, which was directed by Panos Cosmatos. We have talked about him before. He is the son of George Cosmatos, an old action director from the 80s. The only thing I was aware of his that he had directed was a movie I saw last year or the year before called Mandy, which was a psychedelic revenge thriller starring Nicolas Cage.
Wasn't it Lovecraftian, though, too?
It is very Lovecraftian, and so is this story. And it is very drug-induced otherworldliness. Basically, the plot is a wealthy recluse hosts 4 accomplished guests at his stylish mansion for a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but their intrigue soon turns to terror. I loved the slow build this episode has, and it is slow because they're basically just sitting around a table for probably 30 minutes or more doing drugs and talking about why they're there, but not exactly saying why they're there or revealing why they're there. Peter Weller by far has gone up several notches with me after seeing him in this episode. He reminded me of like a druggy version of Charlton Heston.
Yes, and interestingly, because I can go ahead and say it now, that is my actual least favorite of any of the episodes.
I had a feeling it would be.
And not because of the reasons. I think the reasons you gave are all very valid reasons for this episode. It is a slow burn, which it seems like it's so intentionally trying to distract you that makes it even more nerve-wracking, and you're more worried about what's going to happen and tense. So that works. I do like the performances. I love some of the production design. I think the lighting works for this one really well, and the way he's going just around the table to those full side shots of close-ups of everybody as they're having these discussions and stuff, but it just doesn't do anything for me. I just, by the time they get to the climax and everything, I'm like, and we sat around a table for 25 minutes for this? Seriously?
But when they go to the statue or the meteor or whatever the fuck it is,
yep.
It's very Lovecraftian. It's very color out of space. Some people see it and their face melts off, like in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Others run or whatever. But I love the ending of it because the ending is really the beginning. It's basically you see the monster go out into the street and then you just pan back and see the city. And it just reminded me of The Walking Dead. I was like, okay, here comes the zombies getting ready to spread, So I just loved it. That's it. I don't know. It was right up my alley.
My number 1 is your number 3. My number 1 is Autopsy.
Okay.
I thought it was the best done of all of them, really, in every respect. And again, this was hard just because, like you said, some of the stories are humorous. Some of them are slow burns. Some of them are modern. Some of them are set in a period. So, and it's really hard to say, oh man, it's kind of apples and oranges. I'm in an apple mood today, because they all are really good. Yeah. It's just that to me, what hit on every single element, hit a home run was the Autopsy. Okay. That's my number. my number one.
My number one is obviously not in yours, so it's in
Not
your
in my top
honorable mention.
5, obviously.
No, it's not, and it is The Murmuring. It is the very
See,
last
that
episode
is so
that
weird.
aired.
I have read like 4 other people online who said it was their favorite episode, and I was
Absolutely.
going, why?
Because,
It's a good haunted house story, but big damn deal.
No,
oh my God.
it's great. I think, well, if you go back to one of our top 5s we did here recently when we talked about subgenres, paranormal is up there number 2 with me. And this is a paranormal story. It's set on an island that's isolated. I love the isolation. They're just 2 characters in a house being haunted. They're being torn apart by this thing that one of them knows about and one of them doesn't know about. It's got Andrew Lincoln in it, who I haven't seen since The Walking Dead, and he's great in it. Essie Davis, who I don't know if you've seen The Babadook, but she's the woman from The Babadook, and this was directed by Jennifer Kent, who did The Babadook. It's based on a Guillermo Del Toro story. So there you go again. Mourning a major loss, ornithologists Nancy and Edgar flock to a secluded home to study birds, but the house's history reveals heartbreak and horror. And basically, several years earlier, like 30 years earlier, a mentally unbalanced woman, kills her son and
herself.
And herself afterwards, yes. And this is what Essie Davis's character ends up discovering far before Andrew Lincoln, and she has trouble convincing him of that because they recently lost a child themselves, and he thinks it's grief, not haunting. I just thought it was a really, really well done ghost story.
And I did too. Like I said, there's none that are bad in here. I thought it was a really good ghost story. I just think it wasn't very scary to me. And when I had to think back, okay, if you had to pick your 8, does that one jump out? No, not really. No. You know, it's kind of like my other honorable mention, which is the only other one we haven't really mentioned, which is Dreams of the Witch House, which, again, pretty good. Another haunted house story kind of thing, but didn't really stick out as memorable to me, especially not in the top 5.
So it's my least favorite of all of them.
Okay, it's my next to least sort of thing. So, yeah, I liked Murmuring better than I did it, mostly for, well, they each had their assets. One, I think Dream House had a really cool witch design, but the acting performances in Murmuring were just so good.
Well, yeah.
His 2 breakdowns are phenomenal, and hers too. It's just really, really good. And that's what, to me, elevated it above, Dream Witch House.
Yeah. So, yeah. My 3 honorable mentions are ironically the 2 Lovecraft stories, Pickman's Model and Dreams of the Witch House. Both, to me, we talked about this off air and about how any Lovecraft adaptation you have to basically embellish because there's just not enough in the way Lovecraft writes to get everything across without adding some character development and stuff that is not in the story.
So much of Lovecraft is first person monologue. It's so internal, and it's internal losing your mind usually. So your perspective is shifting, things are changing, things that you just saw aren't there, that kind of thing. So it's a very Philip K. Dick kind of storytelling, and it's hard to do unless you do it really, really well. And I agree with you totally.
Yeah. And I think that's why they ended up in my honorable mentions. Dreams of the Witch House. I agree with you on the creature design. I think it's great. I think Rupert Grint is great. I've never really seen those Harry Potter movies, but I know who he is, and I think he's a good actor. But I have seen Twilight, and I didn't like it. And Catherine Hardwicke directed that episode, and I didn't like it either. It may have something to do with a little bias toward her. I don't know.
This is much better directed than Twilight. So if you didn't like this, you really won't like Twilight, and it really is not well done. But I did kind of like the sibling love story in this too. I thought that was really nice and kind of a cool story element.
It's very young adult to me, and maybe that's why.
Very much. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other of mine was Lot 36. And the reason I picked it, even though I did think it was a creepy way to start off, and it was great when he went into that locker and then there was like this secret dimension he walked through in that back wall. I was like, I'm all in. I am all in. And then I saw the creature and I was like, this is too CGI. And it was so CGI, it just pissed me off. So
agreed.
Yeah, so Lot 36 fell into my honorable mentions mainly for the special effects.
So do we want to recap really quick? So my
Sure.
top 5 are The Autopsy, Lot 36, The Outside, Graveyard Rats, and Pickman's Model. And your top 5 are?
The Outside, Graveyard Rats, The Autopsy, The Viewing, and The Murmuring.
There we go.
There we go.
And we would love to know what you guys think. There are only 8 episodes, so it's 1 through 8. Pick them and let us know, where we may have gotten it wrong in your opinion, or where we got it right.
Please subscribe. Please ring the bell. We could always use your support. And if you like what you see, we have other shows on here, as well as some shows on Patreon that are a little bit more in depth on some old series that we like. And I think that'll do us for today, David.
See you next time.
All righty. Bye.
You can't start the car. Johnny has the keys.